Hello, I'm David. This is Sapiens Forward with news and discussion on AI topics that matter to regular people like you and me. And today in the show, we're going to take a look at some of the news stories about AI that have come across my feed in the last few days that I think you ought to know about. Well, today is June 12th, 2025, and let's get right to it. All right, so let's see. First story we got, the UK government is going to provide AI training to over 400,000 civil servants. So apparently the UK government, so United Kingdom, over there, in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, they're going to be working to provide practical AI training to over 400,000 civil servants starting this fall, 2025, as part of a productivity overhaul. Officials are already piloting AI tools with potential savings of 75,000 analysis days annually, worth 20 million pounds in staffing costs. So, analysis days, they're essentially looking at types of analytical jobs and tasks that some of these workers could be performing and kind of aggregating that to come up with some projections on what they could see as days essentially saved in terms of these workers' time and part of their daily work time. So, what are some of the key points here? I think I'm kind of impressed that the UK government over there in Europe is essentially taking kind of a humanist approach here, trying to figure out how they can train their workforce to be more effective. I think we keep hearing a lot of talk about layoffs and things like that over here in the U.S. I know that workforce is being impacted around the world. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. Not not completely at the fault of maybe the U.S. government and its tariff policies, but certainly impacted by that. That's not really something I want to get into on this show. But I like to take a humanist approach to things. I think I sort of adopt a rather humanist approach to life and my work and overall philosophy. And this seems to me kind of a humanist approach. Like, how can we help our workforce to make them more effective? Because ultimately, there's plenty of people out there who want to see governments be more efficient, to spend less tax money on things. I get that. But instead of just straight up firing people, letting people go, ending people's careers, potentially their retirement, which is arguably something the US government has engaged in the last few months, earlier this year, with a lot of cuts and things like that. I'm really encouraged to see the UK government is looking at investing in their workforce, finding AI tools they can use to make them more productive, providing them training. Training, that's an important thing. One of the principles I talk about here with Sapiens Forward is the concept of AI literacy. That is just going to be an essential skill that people will need to have. We all will need to have it as AI is becoming more and more interwoven into the fabric of our lives and our work. You need to understand how to use it. And so there may be people that haven't caught up on it yet. They're not particularly interested, or they haven't found a need. That need will probably be foisted on them by either their employer or the government. So at least they're looking at how they can help those people out. And so I encourage that. I'm definitely encouraged by that. Let's take a look at the next topic. So more news out of United Kingdom. We got a lot of European sort of topics today. The UK Prime Minister announces AI infrastructure investment at London Tech Week. So the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, he announced a £1 billion AI infrastructure funding proposal, a sort of TechFirst education initiative at this conference. So essentially, more investment in training. So 7.5 million workers being trained in AI by 2030. And to look at introducing further AI assistant tools to help out workers in UK government. So again, this seems like a broader approach of investing in the workers, the workforce, the civil service workforce in the UK government. I applaud that. I feel like that's the way to go. When governments and companies are looking at how they can be efficient, how they can utilize AI to increase efficiencies, maybe reduce their bottom line, boost their profits, or for governments and municipalities to maybe make more effective use of revenues, which often come from taxes, in order to better serve their constituents. On one end of the spectrum, you can just lay people off, and that seems to be what a lot of the most capitalist leaning companies will do. And, I don't necessarily fault them for that. In a capitalist type of system, um, their goal is to make money. But, sometimes those results seem to be at the expense of the workers, which is very disappointing. But there you have, on one end of the spectrum there, well, we've got too many workers. Let's let go a lot of them and have the remaining workers pick up the slack, and then we can see more profitable outcomes. Okay, I get that. And like I said, the U.S. government this year, the Doge initiative, Department of Government Efficiency, really took a very strong, assertive, and aggressive approach to just identifying workers to have them retire early, to just cut. And in many cases, they fired people who were essential to many different programs. And ultimately, they had to go and rehire many of those people to make those mission critical programs work, and end up having to pay them inducements and to try and encourage them to take their job back. I mean, just very counterproductive. That's one way to approach this, and it's not necessarily the way that I encourage, as you can kind of tell by the way I talk. The other end of the spectrum is to invest in your workers, help them become more efficient, and I think some of the goals mentioned by Summers is to not necessarily replace people, um, or to get rid of people, not have them replaced by AI or have them just essentially let go because of AI. But and maybe they won't have to hire new people. They can make the existing staff, civil service workers, be able to be more effective, so that if there's a growth and need for services and work, they are able to handle that. Um, but it doesn't go without saying that while that can sound great, that does mean there may not be growth in employment in that area. And I think one of the stories we'll talk about here a little bit later in the IT field, that's something that you were seeing and experiencing, and is definitely worth talking about. But anyway, yeah, big investments by the UK government in AI infrastructure and training for the workers. Great to hear about it. Okay, what do we got up next? AI technology is transforming the advertising industry amid job displacement concerns. So, in previous stories recently, we talked about how Meta, a company that owns Facebook, Instagram, Threads, um, many of these kind of social media platforms, according to Mark Zuckerberg, who heads up Meta and was the creator of Facebook originally, one of them, um, has shared relatively recently of their goal to essentially um, develop AI powered advertising at Meta. And essentially, how I would distill it is their goal is to be able to provide kind of end to end digital marketing service through AI tools on our platform. So essentially, you don't need to go to some kind of um, middle person agency to help you with advertising on their platform. Essentially, a company could just set up a Facebook page and say, "Hey, I'd like to get customers to my local plumbing business," or something like that. And they just push the button on the Facebook app, and it just utilizes the AI tools they have there to essentially evaluate your brand, the logos and things and colors you use for your Facebook page, maybe the website that you link to it, do research on that business and information you can gather about it in the local region where you're at. Already understanding maybe a little bit what the typical types of customers might be for that locality and the type of business, and maybe even reach out to you and ask you questions. The AI could kind of do that itself potentially, and then basically create the advertisements, to create posts for you on Facebook, to put them in front of potential users, collect leads, and send you the information so you can reach out to them or have them contact you. It honestly, having worked in the digital marketing space for many years myself, and after having seen what many of the different types of AI tools that are available now and what they can do, AI agents, doesn't sound far fetched to me at all. But to people who might be working at AI, not AI, but digital marketing agencies, that's could be a little scary. Like, well, okay, where do they fit in that? Now, of course, this is just what Meta's doing. It's not the entire advertising industry, but um, that is a sizable portion of the online space for sure. And there's a lot of money there. Seeing some reports here of some agencies, they're not doing so well, experiencing some lag in growth. They're particularly in the UK. There's just record numbers, thousands of people employed in agencies over there, which is great to hear. But with AI tools like this and some of the uncertainty that they are bringing about, it makes you really wonder, if is it going to stay that way, or is this kind of a peak period right now for that? Now, um, what do I think about that? For anybody in digital marketing, and employment is a topic we speak about a great deal on this channel, because I think that's one of the things that really matters the most to regular people like you and me, is like, what is AI going to do to my job? What's it going to do to the job market? Um, I would say, anybody in the digital strategy space, you've probably been paying attention to what Google's been doing with their changes to search and how AI mode is there. Certainly, people who are just using that on their day-to-day basis, they're finding like, oh, this is different, cool, right? But there's big impacts there to digital marketing and SEO. It's all just kind of been thrown into turmoil. So I think people who are in the digital marketing space, digital strategy, advertising, need to be very cognizant of how turbulent this is. Pay attention to that. Look at and or learn about what AI tools can do, how you can use them, what kinds of things it can do that maybe you used to do, and maybe it can do just as well. Be mindful of that. Identify things that maybe the AI tools aren't doing so well, and figure out, is that something you can do? I think you can take that kind of rubric and you can apply that to just about any type of knowledge based work or white collar job, even not necessarily white collar jobs, just about any job, but certainly much more prevalent and relevant to white collar and knowledge based jobs. Take that approach. Identify what are these AI tools doing. Don't hide from the AI tools. Don't try and stick your head in the sand like an ostrich. That saying, right? And pretend it's not there. Lean into it a little bit and try and figure out, if your company isn't already making you use AI, you should figure it out on your own. Maybe don't do it on your work computers or whatever it is, but try it out. And it's like, what about your job can AI tools and AI agents currently do pretty well? All right. Because it's just going to be a matter of time before the company you work at or the agency or whatnot, they're going to think, well, it seems like AI can do that pretty well. Maybe we can have the AI do that instead of you. And if there's no other things for you to do in that job, that's a problem for you, right? But I'm optimistic. There's always going to be other things for people to do, because there's going to be things that AI won't do well, even if AI becomes just super intelligent, right? Because of the human experience. Humans are going to want to interact with other people. They're going to have context and understanding that AI just won't have. So that'll be an advantage of being a person in a world that's going to be rapidly filled up with AI stuff everywhere. So keep that in mind. If your job currently doesn't involve any kind of human interaction and you do all your work on a computer and it's software related, you really need to evaluate what you're doing. I'm not trying to be a doomer or pessimistic, just trying to be very realistic about it. Really evaluate the type of work you do. Let's talk about it. There you go. There's a lot of disruption to the digital marketing space. Let's check out the next article. So Stability AI, that's one of the AI companies that's been around for a little while. They're facing a lawsuit, copyright infringement lawsuit from Getty Images. So we talked about the other day that there were some other lawsuits. OpenAI has been hit with some from some of the big media publishers out there. So clearly, a lot of AI companies are really facing pressure from lawsuits. I think many of us, maybe more than a year ago, were like, this seems like a lot of content and media out there might be slurped up into training for these AI systems, and people are really wondering now. It's like, what's happening? Is it just the Wild West? They're going to have free reign with this? They're going to do what they want? Well, the lawsuits are catching up to some of these companies, right? And that's interesting. So Getty Images, so this is a big repository and database of photographs and things like that. A lot of content creators out there use that and they license it from Getty. There's some that don't require any kind of cost, but still, licensing and intellectual property, that sort of thing. Well, Getty is spending millions of dollars, pounds, just a lot of money, really, representing a global kind of aggregate list of like content creators, essentially going after some of these AI companies like Stability AI, alleging in the suit that they're using images from Getty for like Stability's diffusion tool to generate images. And in some cases, purportedly being able to still see the Getty watermarks in them. That's not really going to help Stability very well in their case. But certainly there's plenty of AI companies and people who are lobbyists for AI companies and proponents of what AI companies are doing, suggesting that, well, this is just going to be necessary in order for these AI tools to be able to train and to become advanced and to win the AI race. There's this kind of AI race going on out there between nations, United States and China, like kind of leading here and just kind of constructive race to try and figure out who can advance AI faster, right? Not something I try and dig into very much because that's not the kind of level that I'm really worried about. I'm worried about, what about regular folks? What matters to us? Well, this sort of stuff matters to regular folks when you might be a content creator. Maybe you create works of art. Maybe you do photography. Maybe you create videos, films, you write books and things. And these AI companies, if they are just taking your works that you've produced and you've copyrighted and you own the intellectual property for, and they just slurp it up into the training of their systems, you're kind of losing out. And so it's an important topic. It's not one I'm going to dwell on too much. There's not much I can do about it other than speak about it, talk about it with others. But certainly this is something people in a kind of creative spaces need to care about because it's having an impact there. All right. And let's take the next one. And the last one for today, circle back over to United States. So we're looking at IT unemployment rates. So the IT field unemployment rate increasing to 5.5%, potentially due to economic and AI factors. So unemployment rate rose from 4.6% to 5.5% in May 2025 for US IT industry. So this is something like the fifth consecutive month that it's above the national average. So in total amounts and absolute amounts, is this end of the world? Probably not. Certainly it doesn't feel too good for people who have been laid off this year. Tens of thousands of people in IT and tech related fields losing their jobs just really feel bad. Feel for them. Hope, wish them the best and, try and send them some positive vibes. But still, it's notable in that it's speaking to this broader trend of this consecutive rate exceeding the national average. And it really makes you wonder, is this going to be a new normal? How long is this trend going to continue? And it's hard to say. I mean, some of this, as the topic kind of alludes to, is broader economic conditions, the whole tariff situation in the United States, and the government, current and Trump administration, has created a fair amount of uncertainty in the U.S. economy and global economy. Really, I'm not going to dig into that, other than to say uncertainty has a negative impact on business and how companies plan for their future and where they're going to invest. And if it makes them wonder, like, maybe a recession is going to be on the way, they may not hire more people, or they may be more apt to let people go. That can be a consequence of that. So uncertainty is a big deal. And so in my humble opinion, I don't think this whole tariff situation is helping that particular space. There's certainly the hope by many people that more jobs will be created in the United States as a result of that. But I'm not so sure that, historically speaking, from an economic standpoint, that is typically how things have panned out, especially when you look at the history of the U.S. government and economic situations as they relate to the Great Depression. But anyway, that's not our focus here. Other things that are interesting related to this topic is that AI job postings, so not AI doing jobs, but jobs that involve AI in some manner. So kind of AI augmented, AI involved role, not necessarily like, top level engineers working in AI, but that's a part of that too. those postings are up. So this is a topic that we brought up in recent news stories, is that companies that are closely related to AI work, they're seeing a lot of economic activity. Now, some of that could be a little bit of a bubble going on. That's certainly possible. There's a lot of money being thrown at AI right now. So it's not surprising that companies that are doing work on AI are making money. So good for them. And people who have jobs that are connected to AI, they seem to have more opportunities and maybe making more money. So good for them too. Um, but it's interesting and to see actual data around it. At the same time, fields that aren't necessarily using AI primarily in like telecommunications and compliance and support are being impacted negatively. And so there's an interesting thing about statistics and figures around employment. There may be some areas that are going up and other areas that are going down. And if it's somewhat balanced, we might see that overall trends, you don't do anything too drastic, which in a broader sense might seem like a good thing. It's probably not a bad thing. But there you go. I mean, if people who are in those fields are negatively impacted, it certainly feels bad for them. And the people that are in those good fields, everything feels good for them. So I think it's important to keep kind of like a balanced view of that and be mindful of that. Look at those trends. If you are like, for example, in the kind of telecommunications, compliance support, and stuff like that, your company could be looking at that sort of work as an area like maybe they want to start bringing in AI more. Be mindful of that. Be strategic. Be thinking ahead. Everybody everywhere all the time being pessimistic and worried and scared probably isn't realistic or necessary. And this is the thing about the disruption that we talk about. It's one of the AI principles I talk about here in this channel is that disruption to employment and society in general from AI is going to happen. It's already happening. For some people, they don't see it, but it is happening. Things are being upended. Industries, things are changing. Like digital marketing, like we talked about a few minutes ago, the disruption is real. It's already happening, right? Because of how search is impacted and things like that. Other fields, it may be happening, but it's not as prominent in the news. People, it might be sneaking up. You may not hear about it. Maybe your coworkers, and colleagues talk about it, but you need to be listening. You need to be thinking about it. You don't want to be caught by surprise. You start planning ahead, thinking about how you could skill up, cross train, or skill into another area. Maybe you don't have to completely jump out of your field, but maybe you can switch into something that's going to be less impacted. Or at the very least, demonstrate a willingness and capability to utilize AI. So, like if your company says, hey, we're going to start using this, do you think you can handle it? You're like, yes, I sure can. It may not feel good. Maybe that's not something you're proud of or happy about. It just is what it is. And that kind of practical mindset is something that I highly encourage and I talk about on this channel. That's how we need to approach these sorts of things sometimes, is lean into it, figure out what you can do, and adjust. So, um, for those people in that kind of space that's impacted negatively, feel bad for you. But ultimately, we're all in this together. We're all people. We're human race on this planet. So we'll try and do what we can to help each other. And we'll talk about topics like this more on the channel as we go forward, find more resources and help and ideas for people who are struggling with those types of disruptions and impacts to their fields so they can move forward and find something new. Well, thank you so much for checking out the show today. If you find this kind of information and news topics helpful and valuable, really appreciate it. Check out the channel, come back, like and subscribe. Anything you do in that sort of manner, it just helps out the channel and helps it grow. So anyway, thanks so much. Take care. See you next time.